Everything is going well so far, sir. No one suspects anything, and no one has tried to go downstairs yet. Don't worry, I'm staying right by the door. Totally vigilante.
That's vigilant.
Glad I could help. Anyway, I got in a fight with Sarah. I mean, she was wrong, so it was easy, but I thought I'd make sure we weren't getting along so I didn't have to make up an excuse to sleep on the couch. Sleeping with her would be awkward, and this way I can watch the door.
Just don't tip your hand, and don't underestimate any of them, especially the oldest kid. You need to be totally inconspicuous. Speaking of, why are you still wearing that costume?
I don't know, I like it. Why did I have to wear it in the first place?
Because I couldn't get an Adam West costume on time. Everybody online is sold out. And I like the symbolism. Freaks out the one downstairs. Now get some sleep.
Will do. Oh, and boss.
Yes?
I am right about Nightmare Before Christmas, right?
Of course you're right. It's a masterpiece. Objectively.
That's what I thought.
Remember, for every narrative, there is a right answer, and there is a wrong answer. No shades of gray.
Oh, that is a terrible TNG episode.
No room for doubt. Logan's Law.
Logan's Law.
And again I say, what the heck? I've got to get into that basement.
You know, I really believe that one person can make a difference, but one person can't make all of the difference. Being Batman is as much about changing hearts and minds as it is about saving people. But at the end of the day, people's hearts and minds can't be changed if they're unwilling to change them. The responsibility has to be on the individual at some point. If Batman could just snap his fingers and change everyone, it wouldn't be legitimate because he would be doing their thinking for them. And what would solve the corruption in Gotham and get people to be more fair to each other and not have all of the power at the top held by just a few people that control everything would be for people to have more of a regard for life and to see each other more as equals and to care more about their fellow man and than they care about getting all that they can right now at the expense of anyone else. And that's not something that you can make people do. That's something that happens through a lot of people, not just a singular person, not just Batman, setting the right example and showing why that's the better way to live. And I can relate to that to some small degree with reviewing. I can all day long preach the importance of critical thinking and how much it matters that we actually think about the things that we're taking in and that we're not just allowing ourselves to like whatever we're told to like, but also that there is no right answer for what you enjoy and necessarily whether something is good. You know, a lot of different interpretations when you're looking at narrative are valid, and we don't have to have a consensus. We don't have to all think the same way. And at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down, I think, to parenting. And very often I feel like I can blame the parents for when children are simply not raised to think that way, to think critically, or to have, you know, regard for their fellow man. And this arc made me think of those things. This is Detective 654 to 656 about a really unconventional villain who is a child who ends up taking over a lot of the gangs in Gotham, which sounds like a thing that shouldn't be possible to make remotely believable, but actually kind of works. I like it more thematically than I like it in practice for just the sake of the narrative, but it works better than it has any right to. This is Chuck Dixon with art by Mike Netzer, and like a lot of Dixon's work, it is really gritty, really street-level stuff. It's all about gang wars. This first part is called God of Battle, which is a really generic, not great title. And we have a really kind of odd bat suit in this one, which you can't see great on this first page, but it's got these kind of more jagged bat ears, and they look like a throwback to the 1939 bat suit, like the first bat suit. So Batman is fighting a bunch of street thugs, and you kind of think that this is just an example where there's some like unnamed bad guy in the background that's watching Batman fight, and we don't know who he is, but we've got his internal monologue, and you figure that he's just fighting these like random thugs and that this isn't going to matter, but this actually is going to ultimately be connected to the main story here, which is, again, this kid that's going to be called the General. There he is right there in the center of the page, who is going to take over a lot of Gotham's street gangs. There's a better picture of the Batsuit there. Art here is really sketchy. I like it a lot in the context of this, and this is another thing that reminds me a little bit of the Batman Spawn crossover that DC did. We get a little bit of the backstory for this kid, but it is really unsatisfying to me, at least in understanding how this kid gets as ruthless and barbaric and scary as he does. I don't understand why this kid is as desensitized to violence as he is. So the idea is that his parents are simply kind of sick of him. They don't like having him around, so they send him to a military school, not just a boarding school, but a military school. And he gets really into military strategy. He goes to the library and he's reading constantly about generals, and he wants to be like them. And he's going to use that to try to take over Gotham, just like Bane is doing, except this kid is all about strength in numbers, and Bane is all about self-sufficiency. I can do things more or less by myself. And this is another character that kind of makes you understand Bane even better in simply contrasting the two. And Bane will show up right at the end to kind of reinforce that the point of this does seem to be continuing to define Bane by comparing him to other characters who want what he wants but approaches it somewhat differently. He like burns down his military school. He doesn't really have any friends while he's there. Nobody likes him, so he just spends all of his time reading. And we have, of course, probably an unreliable narrator here because we never get any other sides to this. We don't really talk to anybody else that knows this kid, and we don't do very much with his family, with his parents and his sibling or siblings. And when you get to the, I guess he's got multiple siblings, and when you get to the end, that's going to get really disturbing but confusing, and we just don't get, we'll get there, but we don't really know enough about this kid. And so I don't know if he was already kind of mentally disturbed before he went there, and if that had something to do with why his parents sent him away, or if the idea is supposed to be that if the parents aren't involved enough and kids don't have any good influences, they could turn into anything. Anything could happen to them. And I don't know that I fully agree with that. I guess like anything is possible, and it's not like I've studied like every case of child murderers to know if every single one of them had like really disturbing backgrounds, if all of them were like, you know, hurting animals or had diagnoses before they became murderers where they didn't have any sense of empathy. I don't really know what's going on with this kid. I get the sense in places that he has that lack of empathy problem, but I don't get the sense that his parents really understand that, or that anybody at this military school does, and that could be the point, but it's just very, very unclear. And so he is going to go around in Gotham when he gets out of the, when he gets out of the military school, when he burns it down, and start pulling together the gangs, and he wants to go after Black Mask. So his goals are take down Batman and take down the big, and I guess they're threefold. It's first, it's unite the gangs, and then it's take down Batman, and then it's take down Black Mask so that he can become the top dog. And so he has no qualms murdering people. It's really easy for him to pick up a gun and shoot people, and again, he's just really lacking in empathy. And I kind of thought, as I was reading this, that maybe the idea would be that none of this is real to him, that he is still kind of an innocent child and not getting that his actions have consequences. And that doesn't ultimately really seem to be the case. He never really has any remorse. He ultimately turns into yet another Gotham crazy person, and importantly, he's not molded that way by being in Gotham. The idea very often with the psychopaths in Gotham is that the city churns out these kinds of people, and there are so many of them because it's really easy in this environment for them to turn out that way, very often based on really messed up backgrounds, but very often those backgrounds are as disturbing as they are because they live in Gotham. And this kid comes from the outside. And so the main thing I resist about this is that it feels like a lot more people should turn into murderers and psychopaths and serial killers and child rapists and things, because it just doesn't seem that hard for it to happen. And I get the, Killing Joke, like one bad day kind of thing, and I do think that there is some truth to that, but a kid this age, I have a really hard time buying that it would be this easy for him to snap the way he does. Again, assuming that he doesn't have a really unusually, extremely traumatic childhood. I like that devious face he has at the bottom of this page, several pages before we really dealt much with Batman yet. And then Batman goes to Gordon. He starts investigating this. It's going to be quite a while before he realizes that the general is a child, but like a lot of villains that become legends, he'll start to hear that name thrown around, and he's trying to figure out who the general is, who is this person that's pulling together the gangs. And this, by the way, all feels like what will ultimately serve as a lot of setup for No Man's Land, with turf wars and gangs carving up various parts of Gotham and not wanting to cooperate with each other, and basically playing a game of Risk on an urban scale. And we're seeing a lot of that here, but we're dealing with really minor gangs here, and this kid in trying to get these gangs who have been fighting to cooperate, basically by strong-arming them, just by being like the scariest guy in the room. He's able to pull together a militia that is a lot stronger than any of the gangs separately have been. And he is a lot like Bane and Batman in that he rules by intimidation. It doesn't matter that he's an 11-year-old kid. If he can do things that other people would be horrified to do, like it would never even occur to them to try something because it seems so horrific, he can immediately scare them into submission, and that's what he does. So it's that willpower thing. It's being willing to do all that is necessary, and most people are not willing to do that. Most people have lines they won't cross, and this kid says, if I have no lines, people will respect me, and out of fear, if nothing else. And he's also a good strategist. He also knows when to strike, what kind of information to gather before you strike, and he knows how to pick his battles. And so we get a nice full-page spread here of Batman, again, in this kind of unusual bat suit, also with a more jagged bat symbol. So, like, overall, it's the classic kind of standard suit, the kind of Neil Adams suit that we've been using lately, but it has those two distinct differences, and also a bat cape that looks kind of McFarlane-y to me. So this kid gets the ball rolling, and there's a big fight in the streets between a couple of rival gangs. Batman gets involved, and Bullock and Montoya are there as well. I like the panel layouts in this scene, that they're all chaotic, and that reflects the carnage that we're seeing in the panels. And once again, we have to be a broken record, because this is what the lead up to Knightfall and Knightfall is about. I guess I said the last hour that we were going to get into Knightfall. Now I guess we're still in kind of prelude territory. I thought the very next thing would be the first official issue of Knightfall, and it's not. But this is a really good, end of the lead-in, I think. Once again, Bruce is still nothing like at 100%, and really shouldn't be out on the streets fighting right now. Alfred is constantly imploring him to continue to take it easy. He basically went to a therapist and took a nap and has decided he's good. Although he's not in as much denial about it as he was before. I think now he's it doesn't feel like a character regression. It feels like he thinks it's necessary for him to be out there, even though he knows he shouldn't be, which is kind of a departure from what he was doing before, where he was saying, I'm fine, don't worry about me, and I think he was trying to actually make himself believe it. Now he's still saying those things to the people around him. We really just get Alfred these issues, but in the back of his mind, you can tell, I'm still not operating very well. I'm not at 100%. I really need to, lay off for probably several weeks, a long time. But he doesn't know how to let this giant seismic shift in organized crime happen without him being around. And so he feels like he has to go out there and help stop it. And it's going to end up being the kind of thing that he absolutely would have run out and dealt with regardless, because it's about a child. And at first he thinks that it's a kid that is in need, that needs help, and then he's going to find out that that kid, who is like him in that he got hardened very early on and is missing his parents, but for entirely different reasons, and he's lost and in trouble. But Batman's Rude Awakening is going to be, this kid is the problem. He is the bad guy, and it is too late for him. I don't know why he wears these kind of silly glasses, and sometimes they look like a mask. When you put them front on, it looks like a domino mask, and you shouldn't really be able to see his pupils behind them because they're sunglasses. It's very strange. The first read, I really thought they were a mask half the time, but they're not. So once again, we get the imagery of the Bat Demon. Every bad guy that has these lofty ambitions to take over the city, not just to get revenge on someone or steal something, but to become the next ruler of Gotham. Basically, these people all see Gotham like Rome, I'm gonna come in and be the next emperor, and I'm gonna break the rules, and I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to change them. They don't see Batman as a regular man who is ruling Gotham, because he isn't. They see him as an idea that they have to squash, and so even though they think that they might be able to take him down, they don't see Batman as just a man. They see him as the demon. And so then we get next to the next issue, which is Anvil of War. Not a big fan of these titles. They are a little goofy, a little overly melodramatic, even for this material. I'm not sure what the point is with the general, with the stars around his head. I guess it's, or is it just, he wants to be like a 4-star general or whatever, but I mean, he has 3 of them on one side, so I don't know if they just go all the way around, like the stars and stripes, and he's going to change what that means. I'm not totally sure why the stars, but he looks like a real typical, early 90s punk kid. Netzer's art is really growing on me the more I look at it. It's just wonderfully broody and atmospheric. I love how expressive Batman is through these. That panel where he's kind of got a headache and he's got his hand on his forehead is just wonderful. So this is where Batman's going to find out that there is a kid involved in all of this, and he's not going to understand that the kid is the leader. I think at first thinks that he's just kind of roped into this. He's like, oh, they pick him younger and younger now, which is, of course, something that Batman can't stand and that he cannot tolerate. Gotham doesn't just take kids' parents away from them, but it also corrupts them and turns them into the kind of street trash that he's having to fight on a nightly basis. And so it becomes generational, and Batman wants to stop that at the source. How can I make it so that these kids not only don't have to face what I faced when I was a kid, but also don't grow up and turn into these people? And the moral of the story is he can't stop all of that. He's just one man. Once again, some really inventive panel layouts. This seems like another adventure that would have been over a lot faster if Batman was in better physical health, but he's real slow, he's real run down. We're going to continue to see this a lot, where he's going to have all these battles that go on a lot longer than they should, because he really shouldn't be out there doing this right now. This is probably my favorite full-page spread in this issue, and it's kind of weird to call it that, because I mean it is in panels, but it feels like of a piece, and it's really cool. It's just like slanted panels depicting this long fall down the side of a building and over scaffolding, and it's wonderfully cinematic. Again, really expressive, broody Batman. I love how thick all the lines are on his cape and on his face. I'll get a lot of good angry Batman, and this is the most appropriate time for that face, because this is about the corruption of children. And the really sad thing is, this is a kid, again, that Batman cannot save. It's a really provocative and kind of heartbreaking image to see a kid that Batman's trying to save hit him in the back of the head with a big piece of cement, and like, look at this demented face this kid has, and I thought you were a warrior. And it's like, yeah, because Batman doesn't fight children. And when we get to the end of this, I appreciate that Batman doesn't treat the kid exactly the way he would an adult. He's still gonna hold him responsible, but he's going to recognize that it's different when you're dealing with a kid. Then there's a scene here where Alfred is talking to Harold, which I think is a little bit out of place. I think it's trying to give us a little bit of levity to break up the really heavy stuff, because this is not a fun issue to read. It's certainly some intense and heavy stuff, and I guess part of the problem is I just don't find this scene very funny. But Harold, I guess, doesn't speak. I don't know a whole lot about this character. So Alfred is talking to Harold here, trying to get him to give him a list of things to go to the grocery store, things that he wants. I guess Harold is mute or just refuses to speak. So he's got this list of like mechanical parts he needs that Alfred doesn't really know how to make heads or tails of, and then he wants donuts. And Alfred is like, I don't think I can get the kind of donuts you want this late at night. Would jelly be okay? And then Alfred kind of scoffs at him for not getting that he's being sarcastic. And it's a little bit of an awkward scene. It's a little bit like the chocolate fajita thing from Sword of Azrael. And then we get back into the intense and the relentless when Batman gets back into the Batcave and is once again about to fall down and pass out, and he says, I'm fine, just leave me alone, like always. And he's bleeding on the steps, but saying he doesn't need any help. And then, like I said, the general spells out his three big goals. He's going to bring together the gangs, and he's going to get Batman, and then he's going to go after Black Mask. Once again, I like the continuity between the Batman books right now, where we haven't seen Black Mask in a while. There was that issue where at the end, Batman didn't realize that he let Black Mask escape because he thought he got him, and he's been mysteriously in the background ever since then. Batman, but still thought of as the big crime boss that rules Gotham right now. And so this really ambitious, but maybe somewhat naive kid thinks that he can take him down. Although he's not too naive, because he's managed to pull together this big giant militia, and he's, again, so ruthless that it's hard for anybody to stand up to him. And so there's this guy wearing a clown mask. I don't know why why some of these guys are wearing masks like they're in the Black Mask Gang. I don't know if he got some of the Black Maskers to come with him. But anyway, there's this clown guy who says, you're nuts. You think a bunch of snot-nosed punks are gonna shake down Black Mask? I'm reminded of the Daredevil movie. You think you can hold out on the Kingpin? He'll roll over in his sleep and crush you creeps. And then the general says, I never did like clowns, and he shoots him point blank. And that's how he keeps his followers in check. And that's how he is an 11-year-old kid that people are actually listening to. And that's the example he's setting. So Bruce goes undercover. In a really smart way. He pretends to be a wino that's homeless, walking around with a cart collecting cans, and he's gonna get attacked in the alley by some of the general's thugs, and one of them is going to tell Bruce how to get to Sesame Street. No, how to get to the general's hideout, which is in an old like food pantry, like a food center for the homeless. And, of course, that's a good kind of corruption of an area where this place is supposed to help people, but the general is actually using it so that he can do the exact opposite and take over the homeless, just like some government or big business might. Batman investigates here and figures out this kid's kind of obsession with battle strategy, and realizes that he is about to start a big war with the police department. And so then we get into our third and final issue, and that is Batman 656. And this one is called Beseiged, which is, I guess, a better title than the other two, because that does happen. And it's an appropriate, short and sweet, dramatic title. It is difficult to read in that font, though. The first time I looked at it, I was like, Beseiged, and momentarily I forgot Besieged was a word because it was so hard to read. So we're gonna go up now against the police department, and the ultimate goal for the general here is to get into Gotham Impound and get as much stuff from prisoners as he can. So he wants the drugs, and he wants the money, and he wants the weapons. Although, curiously, weapons is third on his list, I guess, because, as you can see here, he's maybe pretty good in the weapons department. He wants to use drugs. This isn't really talked about, but I'm sure the idea is, because these are street gangs and drug runners and gangbangers, the idea is probably use the drugs to get more kids on the street addicted and try to force them to become soldiers in your army. I'm not the biggest fan of this Batmobile, especially in this context. Like, I'm not sure if this is just the design of the Batmobile right now, or if we keep changing it up for different issues. Like, we've only seen the car a couple of times so far in this pre-Knightfall stuff, and it very often, like I think it's had this kind of weird 70s futurism kind of look, but I didn't remember the really weird fins on the back of it. It's really strange. It looks like he's got a pool in the back of his Batmobile. It looks like you could take a bath back there. It's like it's a bathtub. So a lot of kind of warlike action out on the streets, big firefights, Batman trying to stop these people from being able to get into the police department, and then this is where he has the crushing realization that it's the kid that he tried to save that attacked him, that is not just indoctrinated into this gang life, but is actually the leader of the gangs. And I love this this panel where his heart sinks and he just says general. Like, this is who I've been up against this whole time. Like, it's crazy that this kid's able to get as far as he does, and I'm surprised again that I end up believing it as much as I do. And I don't know if it weren't for the comparisons that you can make with Bane and Batman if I would buy it. We get to kind of the crux of the General's philosophy, where he says, don't worry about the Batman, he's only one man, like, we should be able to take him out, look at our numbers. And what he doesn't realize is that Batman is, again, able to intimidate people for the same reason that he can. You make people believe that you're more than you are, and then one man can do a lot more than you might expect him to be able to do. But also, at the end of the day, the General is right. If people would just ignore the intimidation tactics and realize, I mean, like, it's such a difficult catch-22 because you don't want to underestimate Batman because he really is that capable, but at the same time, some of what he's able to do is in the theatricality and deception, like Ra's al Ghul says in Batman Begins. So he is just one guy, and if you realized that, you realize that he's just a mortal person, you'd have maybe a better chance against him. But you also really need, the kind of skills that could match him. And this is, of course, not a kid that can match Batman, but with a full army, he certainly can get close. But the mistake he makes, of course, because he's a kid, is he's overzealous and he is too big for his britches. He has a good sense of military strategy, but I wonder if he's not simplifying his strategies a little bit. Again, so much of this comes from his perspective. I don't know how impressed I'm supposed to be with him. Like, again, it's amazing that he's able to pull these gangs together and that he gets into the police department, but how far ultimately could he have really taken that? Like, did he actually have any chance against Black Mask, or would that be where he met his match? A part of me almost wishes we could see this kid make it a little bit longer so that we could see, like, just how naive he ultimately is. And I guess being taken down by Batman, who is, again, one guy by himself, maybe tells you that. But, he is able to separate him apart from his army, and then he doesn't have his numbers. And that's kind of the point, is that Bane and Batman, and even Azrael, need other people for support, but they are mostly self-sufficient, and they've trained their minds and their bodies in order to become more than the sum of their parts. And that's not a thing that this kid has done. For him, it's all about delegation, and the best way to win is somewhere in the middle. Is delegation, yes. Having allies, yes. But you also have to be able to, in a pinch, handle yourself. And this kid doesn't quite manage that. Although he does manage to get a knife in Batman's side. A lot of this is just sheer audacity and willpower. I like the moment where he pretends like this is all too much for him, and he is still that little kid, and Batman doesn't realize how far gone he is and how hardened he is. And Batman says, "You're just a scared little boy." And the thing is, I don't know if there's any truth to that at all, and it would almost be more interesting if there was at least a grain of truth to that, where, like, this kid is pushing back against society and feels like he has to take it over, he has to be in control. For what reason? Does it come from any personal insecurity? And I never know the answer to that. But I love this moment because and part of it's just that wonderful panel at the bottom with the big gaping cape behind the kid. That is wonderfully classic stuff. But Batman thinks again for a second that that this kid is just suddenly degenerated into an actual little boy. I was kind of afraid that that's where it was going for a minute. He was like, am not, and so we find that, like, none of this was real for this kid at all. And like I said earlier, I kind of wondered if that's what it was, and almost wanted it to be to some degree, but this would be way too easy, where, like, Batman scares him that much in this moment when he's murdered all these people by himself in cold blood and just got done saying, look, he's one man. Like, you'd have to take it a lot farther before I would buy that this kid is that afraid of Batman. And then it turns out that it's a bluff. And so I really like that. But ultimately, Batman manages to take this kid down, and because he is just an 11-year-old kid by himself with nothing but a knife. So, I mean, like, Batman's not going to have any trouble with that. He doesn't have a lot of training on his own, and he is just a little 11-year-old kid. Bullock and the rest of the police department they come in and take down the rest of the militia, and then Batman finally takes this kid in and trusses him up and says, you're a murderer, the kind that your age doesn't excuse. Yeah, you'll be tried as an adult. You won't see the light of day until your 18th birthday. Does that remind you of anybody? Hard not to think of Bane there. And I'll still be here, and next time we meet, you will be an adult. Remember that. So he is handling him differently than he would a grown-up. So he's not going to brutalize him, but when he gets out, he's going to be like any other, psychopath in Gotham that Batman has to take down. And I think Batman has his feelings hurt a little bit here, that a kid was capable of this, that he couldn't save this kid, that he was already too far gone before he even met him. And so Batman just trusses him up, puts him on a light pole, and leaves. And then we see Bird again, and I figured Bane must be lurking around in the background watching all of this, especially because it seems so thematically connected to him. And Bane says, I'm tired of watching Batman take down street punks. I wish Bane maybe commented a little bit on the general, and because I'd love to know if he's at all impressed with this kid for what he's managed to accomplish. And like I'm sure Bane has to see a little bit of this kid, of himself in this kid. But Bane says we need to see him against some of his more ambitious enemies, and that's what's going to get us into Knightfall. And that may be what gives him the initial spark to let all the inmates out of the asylum, which I know happens at the beginning of Knightfall. And then this page is just totally bewildering to me, and I don't really understand what's going on, and I'm sure it's supposed to be a revelation to tell us something about why this kid was as disturbed as he was, but I really don't get it. So this mom's on the phone. She seems to live in a totally different world from the rest of us, and she is surprised that this has happened with her son. She finds out on the phone that he's in prison, and she says there must be some kind of mistake. Our boy would never involve... Well, certainly we'll be there. And then she calls him my little general, which oh man, my cape's coming apart. So she is real out of touch, and I get the sense that from a real early age, the parents maybe planted this idea in his head of military strategy, and it seems like with the dad, it's just to get him out of the house. But she finds it cute somehow, and then the daughter says, Dad, could Ulysses, and I forgot to mention, that's his real name, Ulysses, like Ulysses S. Grant, could Ulysses go to the electric chair? And then he says, we can always hope, and the kids basically look at the camera and smile. Okay. I don't understand this family dynamic at all. Yeah, it's disturbing, it's weird, it's messed up, and a kid that comes from that family could have all kinds of, bizarre mental problems. But I don't understand that family. I don't know if the mom, it's like the mom and the dad seem to be on total opposite spectrums. Like, she's like, he couldn't possibly do this. And the dad's like, I hope he gets the electric chair. I don't even know how to comment on this. I don't know what is going on here. This doesn't really tell me anything except his family is screwed up and they're kind of not so crazy people. And then we get the best panel in all three issues, with Bruce slumped in a chair, just so completely exhausted once again, and totally out of it. I'd love to have that for a poster. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And this is the condition he is in when Bane finally makes a move. So no good for Batman. You can see how he gets into a backbreak situation. I'm gonna go read the next issue. Hope that I'm actually in Knightfall proper now. And I'm gonna think a lot more carefully about how I raise my children after this.